All right, what's up, everybody? We are back. Welcome to another Friday morning weekly coaching with myself, Matt Hunt. You are with Octopi Poker, as always, and today we are going to focus on one of the topics that we've been primarily covering in our weekly challenges over the last few weeks. We're going to focus on playing some dynamic board textures, and in particular, today we're going to look at some 3-bet pot scenarios. So we're going to look at some spots where we're the 3-better and maybe the board comes out in a way where it's not necessarily a donk bet board for the out of position player, or it's not necessarily one of those boards that's really scary for us, but maybe it's got a bit of dynamic nature to it, some straight draws, some flush draws, all those sorts of things. We're going to navigate those boards, and in particular we're going to focus on how we're choosing our bet sizes, how we're structuring our ranges, and various things like that. So before we go into running some trainer spots, I'm going to navigate to our library here on Octopi Poker, and I'm going to start looking a little bit at some aggregate reports. We're going to figure out what our overall strategy is going to look like in some of these spots, just so that we can get a basic idea of some heuristics that we can use and that we can implement to give us a sense of how these board textures are going to play out. So we're going to start with a basic kind of a formation here. We're going to go 60 big blinds, low jack open, and then we're going to go cut off 3-bet, and it's going to fold back around to the low jack, who's going to call. Now, if we open up the aggregate report here and we focus on the 3 to a straight boards, these are going to be the ones that we're mostly going to prioritize here. You will see that a good chunk of these boards are boards that the out of position player is supposed to donk bet. We've got 14% donk bets here on these rainbow boards, 13%, 9% over here. So there's definitely some donking going on these textures. However, I don't really want to focus on those. You can see that a lot of these board textures are, the lower textures that the out of position player can have all 3 sets and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on some of the board textures where it's maybe not going to be necessarily possible for out of position to donk bet, but there's still going to be some connectivity there that is going to have to affect how these boards are going to play out. So the first thing that we're going to do, and I just want to make sure the stream is coming through okay here, because it looks like it might have frozen. That's weird. Don't really know what's going on there. Go live. Okay, we're still live. Well, we should still be live. All right, I think we're good. Sorry, guys. I had a weird problem on the stream there where it was showing up that it temporarily showed up that I didn't have permission to be streaming, and it was like trying to shut me down. Nancy says looks okay. Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think we're good. Sorry about that. A little kind of 1-minute sort of section there that we can edit out or something like that. But yeah, I think we're good. I think YouTube is cooperating. So we'll just kind of proceed as if it is. So we're going to focus in on some of those dynamic textures, like I mentioned, except we're going to mostly prioritize the board textures that are not necessarily the low card sort of donk bet boards here. So we're going to go to high card filter, and we're going to start with 10 high, right? There's not a lot of donk betting on 10 high coming in here. These are going to be examples of boards that people, I think, are naturally, pretty predisposed to feeling really uncomfortable about in 3-bet pots. And if we look at what happens once out of position checks, there's some quite interesting stuff happening as far as the overall bet sizings that we're using. You can see that there's a good chunk of boards that are maybe the small bet boards, B20 and so on. And it looks like those are mostly the ones where we've got, something like Queen Jack would be in range for the opposing player. 10-9-7, I guess 10 Jack 8 suited probably wouldn't be in range for the opposing player here. So there is some variation there. There's a little bit of nuance. You can definitely see that there's some textures that are heavily favoring the B50 and some that are favoring the B20. Not immediately obvious to me why that would be. I think it just comes down to the I guess the B50 ones Okay, so here's what it is. On the B20 boards, the pocket pairs are going to be flopping, like the pocket pairs are going to be flopping sets, or they're going to be flopping an open-ender. But on the B50 boards, 10-7-6 or something, pocket pairs can't flop an open-ender. And even 10-8-6, 10-9-6, that sort of stuff. Those ones that are a little bit less connected, that's where the B50 is coming in. So there is a bit of a nuance there. But if we focus maybe on, let's say, a jack high board here, similar sort of a dynamic, we are going to see that the boards that are a little bit more closely connected, we're going to favor some smaller sizes. A little bit less connected, we're going to favor some slightly bigger sizes. There's even a little bit of jamming here on these jack 10-8 boards, which is quite interesting. But you can sort of see where the dynamics are going there. If we look at high card filter, we want specifically the queen. You can start to see that as the board texture gets higher, as the high card gets higher, we're going to veer more towards a lot more of the smaller betting. And that's going to be a pretty common dynamic, a pretty common heuristic that we can apply here, simply because as the high card goes up, the out of position player or the caller against the 3-bet is going to have a lot more under pairs that are simply not going to be in particularly good shape to continue against a bet from the C-better here. So ultimately, these board textures are just going to result in a lot of check folding for those under pairs, and that's going to mean that the range bet, the small bet size, is going to be quite effective for us here as the 3-better. So that's going to be a pretty big dynamic that we're going to have to keep an eye on. The final thing is that if we focus particularly on the ace-high connected boards, so we're going to go 3 to straight, and then we're going to go ace-high right there, there is a pretty distinct difference between some of these Broadway boards versus the ace-high wheel boards. You can certainly see that the ace-high wheel boards are playing a little bit differently here. If I actually go ace-king, for example, you can very clearly see that all of these triple Broadway ace-king-x boards are range bets. Ace-queen, pretty similar thing. Ace-jack, again, same thing. And then ace-10, they're not 3 to a straight anymore. Of course, that makes sense. So that's pretty clear there as far as the triple Broadway ace high are going to all be range bets. But if we look at the, let's say the high card filter of ace, and then the second card is a 5, well, clearly some of them are not range bets now. This is going to mean that we're going to have to play a lot more cautiously, particularly on the monotone versions of these boards, because there's a lot of middle card hands the caller can have that make flushes on these boards. Plus, of course, they can have some sets and 2 pairs as well. If we change that to a 4, same sort of a thing. They're pretty good boards, but they're not perfect. And again, going straight to, what do we want? We want ace-3, ace-3 deuce. Ace-3 deuce is a little better, actually, except not if it's monotone. So a couple of nuances there for sure, but generally speaking, we do have to be mindful of the differences there. And I think maybe one of the most unintuitive things here is that because of the high card dense nature of our range, a lot of these high card textures that we've seen here, particularly if we were to go to like king high connected or something like that here, they are range bets. They're high aggression boards for the 3-better from in position. And again, this just comes back to the caller having so many pocket pairs that are going to be under a lot of pressure there as far as just facing a small bet. So we're going to keep that in mind, and we're going to go into the trainer, and we're just going to run some reps. We're going to run some drills here at that same 60 big blind stack size, low jack. We're going to play as cutoff versus low jack right there, and 3-bet pot. We are also going to play for both selected positions, just because we want to also understand what some of the dynamics are as far as the caller and how the caller is going to play. So we're going to go two-tone and rainbow boards. We are then going to go, two-tone and rainbow. Come on, right there. There we go. Come on. All right, there we go. It was lagging a little bit. 1, 2, or 3 Broadways. So we're going to go at least 1 Broadway card. Not going to have any of those 3 undercards boards in there. because we don't necessarily want to focus on those boards that might be donk bets for the out of position player. So I think this is approximately the right configuration. So let's go save and train. Now, our first board that we get here, we are the out of position player. It's 10-7-6, and I think given that we are out of position here, we're going to be checking range. George is going to come with a half pot bet size. Now, with a hand like ace-8 suited, we have to really be quite conscious of the fact that this hand might be a decent check raise candidate, especially since we have the backdoor flush draw. So immediately I think that it's at least a potential consideration that we could raise here. We do have this 20 big blind raise size. We don't have, well, we do have the all-in, but we don't have any size between the 20 big blind and the all-in. So we're either going to kind of make a pretty small raise, or we're going to shove if we're going to raise at all. Now, I do think that, I think I'm going to go with the raise here. I think I like the raise in this spot. Let's see. Oh, mistake. Okay, 1% mistake. So not quite what we want there. Let's go with the call. Yeah, it is a call. So we can't fold a front door gut shot here. We can't fold an 8 or a 9, it looks like, to that half pot size. So it does make sense. We're not really playing a lot of raises here. In fact, we're in particular not really playing much of the small size. So kind of just think we look like we just play call or fold here. So that seems reasonable. And now we actually turn the straight. So I think this is a really interesting spot because it's one where our range is extremely condensed into a lot of hands that interact with this board texture. So I certainly think we can at least consider donk betting here because there's a lot of hands in George's range that have some really awkward decisions against donks. And we did obviously make a straight here. I think that if we're going to donk, we probably like the, I think we like the 8.5 size. Maybe we like the 16.9. This is a tough one. I think I'm going to go 8.5. Let's see. Okay, it is good. So it's actually, yeah, okay, so it's high frequency 16.9. So we do prefer going a bit bigger, but smaller is fine. And as you can see, very, very high frequency donk here. Super high frequency. Pretty much almost range, honestly, because it's such a good card for us. And I think this is a type of spot that players will miss really, really often. They're not going to find a lot of donks here. So great example of a spot that, you practice this, you put in some reps, you start to see these spots that maybe are not naturally coming up very often in game, but you can prepare for them really effectively using these kinds of approaches. So we do get called, and then the river is a 6. So now we obviously lose to any kind of a set or that made a full house here, but that's very, very low frequency in George's range here. He's not going to have very many hands that we actually lose to. I think we can just rip it for value and, oh, okay. So we can rip it for value, but interestingly, we are doing a surprising amount of checking here. That is very curious to me. So let me dig into this one a little bit. So if we go side-by-side ranges here, let's see why we're kind of playing a bit more cautiously here. So we've got straight 33% of the time. So a lot of our range is a straight here. 29% top pair, so we still have a 10 fairly often. A lot of low pairs, some king high type stuff, some ace high. And then if we look at George's range, George has an overpair a really big chunk of the time. In fact, overpair plus top pair here is like 44%, which means obviously he has a one pair hand or an overpair, I guess a two pair hand here, pretty frequently. Very big portion of range there. He only has a straight, essentially 5% of the time. And he actually, I guess it says set here. This should be full house. This should say full house here. So that is a little bit of a glitch there in the way that this is being represented. It says full house over here, but it only says set over here. So in the end, that should say full house. But it's interesting, he only has it 2% of the time. I do think that maybe what's happening here is that he is supposed to value bet an overpair when we check to him. So that's kind of what's happening. He is supposed to jam aces, kings, and queens for value sometimes there. So that could be a major contributor. But overall, I am a little surprised that we're not doing more jamming there. I guess we are jamming the vast majority of straights. Ace-8 just simply happens to be the one straight that we're not jamming as often. I guess maybe it's not the vast majority. I mean, if we look at the straights category. Yeah, so we're actually checking ace-8 and 10-8. I guess because we block the top pair stuff that we might be trying to get value from. That makes sense. And then pocket 8s and 8-7, we're mostly jamming. So kind of interesting there to see the breakdown. But looks like we did fine overall. Not going to be a disaster to jam the river by any means. So we did do okay with that one. Now, ace-4 deuce. We are not going to have any donks here. So we're just going to check. We're back in the low jack again. And this time, we face a small bet from George. But clearly, we have to fold. 10-9 suited is basically the very bottom of our range here, and as you can see, it is pure fold. So we're not going to worry too much about that one. So this is an interesting one now, because we are the cutoff in this spot. We are the pre-flop aggressor here, and we're in a position where the board comes out Jack 10-8, and that's going to be one of those boards that we did see previously. There were some shoves on. However, we primarily would be shoving here if the board were two-tone, less so on a rainbow version of this texture. So I don't think we're likely to shove here. I do think we probably can c-bet quite a bit because of those under pairs that do exist. I think I like the b50 here, and b50 is a mistake, but it's only a 0.1% mistake. b20 possibly? Okay, so it's just b20. And there is actually, there is actually a surprising amount of shoving with this specific hand here. A little bit more than I expected, so kind of interesting. But basically, definitely a really good board for our overall range. Definitely one that we get to play pretty aggro in general. So low jack does check, and we get a heart on the turn, which is quite beneficial for our specific hand, given that we now block some of those very strong hands like ace-jack of hearts, ace-8 of hearts as well. I would think that we probably can bet again here. I think I like the 17.8. Let's go with that. Yeah, very good bet. Looks like that's a good size, although 50% also pretty good as well. So a nice hand to kind of barrel with there, and we do pick one up as the aggressor. Now I'm going to do one more hand in this formation, and then we're going to switch to doing a little bit of some out of position spots where we 3-bet from the small blind. So this board, 8-9 queen or queen 9-8, we flop a set. We're not going to donk here. We're just going to check. We do face 8.5. Now we did see in a previous spot here that there was not a ton of raising coming in against this half pot size. And I think it's quite reasonable to look at this as a polarized enough sizing that we kind of benefit a little bit from keeping some of those bluffs in George's range here. So it wouldn't shock me if a lot of our very strong stuff doesn't really check raise this board very often. I think I'm going to go call here. Oh, 0.2% mistake. Okay, so maybe we click it back. So small mistake. It looks like eights and queen jack are like the only hands that are pure check raise here. So not really a dramatic error by any means to not raise. Call is still going to be doing completely fine. And we do mix calls and raises if we have nines. We pure call with Jack 10 suited, so that is quite notable there, that we have a lot of incentive to sort of trap a little bit with that hand, but looks like eights is going to do better as a check raise. George does have King Jack offsuit, and he just folds. So let's now flip over to looking at a few sims for some spots where we're the small blind. So we're going to go back to our pre-flop action selector. We're going to go to the hijack, and it's going to fold around to the small blind. We're going to make it 9.2, and the hijack is going to call. We're going to go to the aggregate reports here. Now we're going to focus on the same boards that we did before, 3 to a straight. And immediately what you'll see is because we're the 3-better now, obviously there's no donk betting. There's no, there's not necessarily any boards that would count as a donk bet here. So we can actually put some energy into figuring out how the high card is going to affect things that goes beyond just looking at the let's say filtering by the ace highs and so on. Let's now start with, well, the very lowest high card that's possible here for a 3 to a straight board is a 4. So the 4-3 deuce boards, as you can see, they're definitely not clearly ushering us in one direction or another. We have some checks, we have some bets, both large and small, so certainly not necessarily a situation that we can have an easy sort of simplistic strategy on, right? We are going to have some incentive to use both sizes here, so we will have to kind of make some decisions there as far as how comfortable we feel with each of the sizes. If we switch to 5 high, pretty similar dynamic. So these low card triple wheel boards, a lot of similar stuff going on, except maybe a little bit more of a shift towards the larger size or a little bit more checking. If we go 6 high, then similar sort of a thing. Similar to the wheel boards, we are facing ranges that include all the sets. The only boards here that we are starting to range check are the ones where there's also a straight that is in the caller's range. So we've got 6, 5, 4, board textures like that. That is going to favor us basically range checking here. So we are starting to get into that territory where range checking becomes a consideration. And the same is true for 7 high. You can certainly see 7, 6, 5 is progressively a little bit worse than some of the others. Then if we go to 8 high, 8, 7, 6, again, these boards where the suited connectors can flop the nut straight, these are definitely going to be more challenging. And of course, the monotone versions of these boards also going to be very tricky for us. We're basically range checking those ones. If we go to 9 high, now, 3 to a straight, there we go. 9 high is where it starts to get a bit interesting, because 9 high boards, we do actually start to see the flatter having some underpairs here. So they do have some 4s, 3s, deuces, etc. that are going to be in slightly worse shape. And as a result, these boards do play maybe a little bit more aggressively than the ones that are slightly lower. And on top of that, they also play with a bit more of a large size or a check kind of a dynamic here. So you can quite clearly see how that's coming into play. You can see that even a 9-8-7, because the 3-better can have Jack-10 suited, now you're starting to get to the point where the advantage for the caller isn't quite as significant. If we go to 10 high, similar sort of a dynamic. 10 high, we're kind of check or the larger bet, check or B50 here, quite consistent there. Jack high, now we start to see some of those jams, certainly seeing those jams that we did before, even more often here from out of position. So Jack 10X, certainly a texture that we're going to have to be very mindful of. But a pretty similar dynamic as far as check or big bet being pretty good. For queen high, now we start to get into the area where these queen high boards are going to actually allow for some range betting. There is a bit of shoving coming in, but not a ton. And in particular, you can see that the queen jack 10 is obviously really good for the 3-better, because the 3-better has all of the ace king, and there's so many undercards, so many underpairs on that board as well. If we go to king high, we will see similar dynamics. Now we're starting to get into range bet territory again, because of all those underpairs. So king high connected here, very, very good for the 3-better. We really want to apply a lot of pressure there. The only exception here is when it's monotone. We are a little bit more cautious. And then finally, if we go to ace high connected, now is where we start to see a big, big division between those wheel boards and the triple Broadway. You can definitely see it here. The wheel boards, ace 5, 4 and below, they are having a lot more checks, but the triple Broadway high card textures, those are pretty close to being range bets here. Even with the monotone versions, the triple Broadways are actually some larger bet boards, simply because if it's ace king queen, ace king jack, etc., there's actually very few available flushes for the flat caller to have here, right? There's not that many ways to make a flush on ace king queen all clubs if the ace, the king, and the queen are all already out there, right? There's not that many flushes that can exist there. So, a couple of interesting dynamics. Let's dive into some trainer spots and start to figure out our way through some of these scenarios. So we're going to go play as small blind against hijack, 3-bet pot, play for both, and then board configuration is going to stay the same. We're going to go save and train. So let's see how we can navigate some of these drills. Our first one is king 10-9. we did see before that these king high textures that were connected are quite commonly going to be range bet boards. So I think we can go ahead and use the B20 here, especially with the ace of diamonds in our hand. And as you can see, it's kind of a mix between both, but it's very reasonable to use B20 here. Now we do get called, and the turn is a 3 of spades. So I would expect, given that this turn card is basically a brick here, I think we're going to be in the kind of territory where it makes sense to continue with a size that's fairly close to geometric. Now, we don't really have an exact geometric size in this sizing setup. We only have 14 and 21. 21 is slightly bigger than geometric, 14 is slightly smaller than geometric. So if I was really picking here in game, I'd probably go like 18. But nevertheless, I think the easy option here is probably going to be, since we're out of position, going a little bit bigger than geometric, just to create that lower river SPR here. So we're going to go 21. And we do get shoved on. 21 looks like it's okay, although actually the sim prefers the 50 here. 21 is a little bit too big. We get shoved on. That sucks. We have to fold. So yeah, very trivial fold with ace-jack there. So good hand from us there. Now we are the caller. So now we flat the 3-bet. We get this king-jack 10 flop, and we have pocket fours. Now we are facing a very small c-bet here. We're facing the B20 from out of position. So not a great spot for us overall. And I think with fours, even though we have a pair, probably seems like we just have to fold. Oh, it's mixing. Wow. I did not expect that, but it actually looks like fours is basically the only, it's funny, 9s and below are pure folding, except for fours is actually mixing. So very close, very interesting spot. Hey, Mathor, welcome. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you showing up for us. The small blind now, oh, sorry, let me reframe. Jack 8-7 is our next board. Small blind does come with B50, so George is using the half pot size here. We have ace queen high. I think with the backdoor flush draw, it's quite hard to fold here in position, so I think we're going to hit the call button. And yep, we're good with call. 1.48 big blinds of EV, so I think we're solid there. Now, turn is a 9. Now this puts 4 to a straight out there, and I think that it's a very positive card for our range. It's a card that does give us a ton of equity. It does allow us to improve to a straight quite often. We are going to have to try to find some bluffs pretty aggressively here. And as a general rule of thumb, if it's quite hard for us to have a no pair hand, then usually a lot of the no pair hands that we do have are going to bluff. They're going to be pretty well served as bluffs. So I think we're going to bluff with this one, and I think I like the 10.2 size. We're going to go small here. Yeah, okay, so it's actually, this hand is a great representation of our overall range. We are using exclusively the B25 size. It's basically 60-40. Our hand plays almost exactly the same way that our range does. So overall, looks like it was fine to bet the small size here as a bluff. In terms of what we're targeting, if we want to just quickly focus in on the full sim here, when we use this B25 size, we're basically targeting, let's look at, yeah, we are targeting some top pair. So stuff like King Jack has to fold some frequency here, which is really good for us. We're also targeting some second pair, so Ace 9, stuff like that is certainly going to be under some pressure. And of course, there's also a good number of hands that are pretty much just an auto fold here. Ace King being an auto fold is very good for our ability to bluff with Ace Queen. So that is naturally going to favor us quite a bit here. I am a little bit surprised that there's some amount of jamming from villain here, considering that our range is basically not going to have, well, I mean, let me see what tough decisions we do have if villain jams. Okay, so when they jam, we are actually indifferent with stuff like Ace Jack, King Jack. I guess I didn't expect we'd be betting those that often on turn here, but it makes sense that if we are, they would be able to jam and put those hands under some pressure. So I guess, yeah, that does make sense. It is logical here that that would be the way that this is going to pan out. So maybe not something that is super unintuitive, just one where maybe I don't think people in practice are really going to find that very often. They're not going to find those check jams very frequently. So next one is ace five deuce, and we're the caller this time, and we actually face a check. Now, I think a lot of players are quite inclined to make some errors when they face checks from the three better, because they tend to be a little bit too paranoid about traps, and they also tend to be a little bit afraid to value bet thinly. And what I mean by that here is that in this particular spot, I think small blind is actually going to be quite dense to a lot of kings, queens, jacks, tens, etc. And when we have an ace here, especially a decently strong one like ace 10, it's not inconceivable that we can actually get a bit of value by betting. So I'm going to try a B20 here, try the small size, and yeah, looks like we're okay. Looks like we're okay betting the small size. Pretty much a lot of our ace X can mix that small size at some frequency. We also do have a little bit of B50 in there, but completely reasonable to bet there. However, we do get check called, and I think we're probably at the point now, especially with this turn being a king that does improve villain to a set sometimes. I think we probably are more going to prioritize a check back with ace 10 on this turn. Let's see. Okay, yeah, high frequency check back, but there is some betting in there. Ace 10 is like right at the bottom of the value range pretty much. Ace jack is high frequency bet, but ace 10 is mostly checking. Then we get a river spade. Now, the river spade here doesn't have as much impact as it might seem like it does, because both players' ranges are somewhat capped. Both players have done a lot of checking here. There's not a ton of aggression that's gone in, so neither player is particularly likely to be, super restricted around flush draws or anything like that, especially when small blind does check the river. So I don't think we're in a spot where we have to be super afraid or super conservative as far as running into a better hand goes. But we do have to consider, of course, if we're playing against George, George has plenty of ability to check raise bluff us. He's going to check raise bluff at a pretty solid rate. So we have to really think carefully about, is this hand strong enough, or is it high up enough in our range that we can justify value betting? And I think that it just about is. The reason why I think it is because it was a mix on the turn. So it's an indicator here that this hand is not that weak here. We're not necessarily looking at a hand like ace 9 or ace 8, which is pure check on the turn. We could have potentially value bet the turn. And if we take a line where we maybe are mixing on the turn and we're considering value betting the turn, but we decide not to, if we then get to the river in a line with no further aggression, it makes a lot of sense to value bet the river instead. I'm going to hit the half pot here because, as you can see, we're not going to use any size smaller than half pot from in position on the river. And I also think that, going 21, going 29-ish, that might be edging towards the point where it's a little bit harder to value bet this hand. So I'm going to hit 14, and yeah, it looks like we did fine here. There is some 14, and there's some jam with our range here. We are jamming certain hands, but we do have two pretty distinct value betting ranges there. And it looks like totally reasonable to value bet this specific hand. So I think we did that one pretty well. Hostito, why does the trainer still give you a perfect on the flop bet there, even though check was technically 0.4 higher EV? Because of how close it was, both are perfect there. Yeah, it's all about the margins, right? If we are, well, actually, it's not about the margins. It's about the strategy that the solver actually takes, right? So if we go back to that flop, if I just load up that particular flop here, right here, the fact that the solver is mixing options on the flop is what causes us to get a perfect in the trainer. So, we took a play that the solver is taking, about 20% of the time here, which is what causes us to get perfect. But the reason why the solver is taking that play at some frequency, even though the EVs technically seem like they're different, is simply that the EVs that you're seeing in the solver are subject to a little bit of margin for error. So you can see right here, if I highlight ace 10 suited and we look at ace 10 of clubs, we look at the three different options, it says check 18.4, bet 20%, 18.3, bet 50%, 18.4. So there is a little bit of margin for error there, and especially when you think about the size of this pot, there's 20 big blinds in the pot. when you're talking about a fraction of a big blind, you're talking about a very, very small percentage of the pot itself. So you have to account for the fact that anytime that we are dealing with a situation where the EVs are really, really close together, we can treat those EVs as being functionally the same. And when the EVs are functionally the same, the solver is going to mix. So that's why we get the perfect rating here, even though the EV was technically lower. It's because in the actual solve itself, the solver is mixing. And if we actually ran it to perfect accuracy, we ran it to infinite degree of accuracy, just let the solve run for months, let's say, we probably would start to see that the EVs are actually basically the same, right? Yeah, cool. That makes sense. Thanks for the detailed breakdown. Appreciate it. I'm glad you know that's logical there. Cool. So in this case we have kings. So we actually flatted pre. We trapped pre. It comes ace 4-3. We face a small bet. Definitely too strong to fold here. So we're just going to call. We're not going to have any reason to raise. Pretty trivial call, 100% of the time here. And now we face 7.1 on the turn. So we face kind of a weird size. It's a little bit uncommon to see this small second barrel from out of position here, but we do face it. And we have to pretty strongly consider here that facing this size, a hand like kings is still pretty strong. We don't have to have that much equity to continue here. Facing B25, we're getting 5-1. We really don't need to be in particularly fantastic shape. So I don't think we can fold kings here. And you can see we actually do raise sometimes. That's a little bit weird. That's a very low frequency kind of a, I guess that's a bluff raise. Is that, I can't be a bluff raise because they can't be folding an ace. It has to be a value raise. That's very weird. That's really unusual there. But we do call, and thankfully we face a river check. So we're just going to check back and hopefully win. And we chop. We chop against kings. Okay, funny. So that one is nice and easy. Now we are, in this case, we are back in the small blind. So we are the 3-better once again here. And we get the ace, queen, jack, 2 spades. We have queen, 10 of spades. So we have all the equity in the world here. This is probably going to be another really good spot where, because it's 3 broadways, we're likely to see a range bet here. I think it's completely reasonable to go with either of the 2 sizes, but I'm going to go small just because that, okay. Just because that does tend to be the priority a lot of the time here. Wow, we actually made a royal flush. Holy crap. Guys, we made a royal flush in the trainer. I have not seen that before. That's so crazy. I've made royal flushes before, like particularly playing online. Like I've had royals, but I have never made a royal flush playing in the trainer. That is kind of wild. I wasn't really prepared for that, but we do make the royal. So let's try to figure out how we're supposed to play this royal flush, guys. I think we're likely to check because range-wise, we're going to have a lot of checks here. Like we're going to have a lot of hands that do favor checking just based on the fact that George's range is going to be fairly dense to a lot of 2 pairs and straights here. George also has some flushes, but not a ton. I would think we probably check. There's a possibility we bet small here. I think we check though. Okay, yeah, 97% check. We don't really do a lot of betting on this card as a whole. So when we do have the royal, you know, naturally we do just check, and we're trying to get George to put some money in there. I think we're probably going to just, is George rigged? I don't know, man. I think it'd be kind of funny if, you know, the frequency that people get dealt good hands in the trainer is actually higher. Like we could rig the trainer and no one would know. That'd be kind of funny. Yeah, I think we probably just check call here. It's possible that we have like a weird click back with I mean, you can kind of do like anything you want really with a royal flush here. Like I think we just check call. Yeah, okay, so pure check call. Okay, we do have some raises, but not a lot of them. Just a really small frequency there. River is this is actually really interesting. We may have some donk bets here. And the reason I say that is because when we check call this turn, we do have a pretty reasonable density of 2 pairs and sets. And this river card obviously gives us a full house at a pretty decent rate. Now, George does have some 2 pairs and sets as well, but not a lot. And I am kind of feeling like it's very possible we might just shove here to put a 10 in a tough spot. And well, when we actually do have a 10 though, maybe when we actually do have a 10, we're kind of blocking enough 10x that we prefer to go smaller. I am kind of leaning towards leading out, but I feel like maybe that just might be a little bit of bias because we actually do have a royal here and we don't want it to go check, check. You always have to be aware of that. It reminds me of a famous hand from WSOP where the guy did quad aces versus a royal. Yeah, everybody's seen that hand. That's a fun hand. That one's definitely a classic hand. I'm actually just I'm gonna shove here. Okay, 0.8% mistake, so small mistake. Half pot, let's try that. Okay, half pot's good. So, okay, so I was right. Wow, I was definitely right. I was 100% right that we actually, not only do we have some donks, but we actually donk our entire range here. And shoving with a royal specifically is a small error because the royal prefers to go a bit smaller because of the fact that we have a 10 in our hand. But we definitely prefer to do a lot of shoving here. We do have, if I was to open up this one, if we look at the overall nature of our range, we have a full house 59% of the time. We have tons of full houses. That's even more full houses than I thought we were going to have here. And we also have a straight 18% of the time, some top pair, some third pair, some low pair, etc. And this royal is actually 2% of our range. Like we have a royal 2% of the time here, which is kind of crazy. So we absolutely do donk bet everything here. And the only thing that we got wrong was the size. I picked the jam size when in fact with the royal here, it's a little better to go with the small size. So very interesting spot. That's how you play a royal flush, guys, apparently. You bet small, you check call, you bet small again. You just kind of try to get them to put some money in. That was crazy. That was a fun one. So next we have ace-5 deuce, and we basically have bottom of range here. We have 10-8. We do have the backdoor flush draw, but I don't expect against B25, or B20 rather, I don't expect we're actually going to continue here. So we're going to hit fold. Yep, we do fold. Very reasonable fold to make right there. Then next board we get 10-9-6 rainbow, ace-jack offsuit here. This is a little bit closer just based on the fact that we have 2 overs. We are facing B50 though. I would expect that if we had the backdoor flush draw, we probably would continue here. Offsuit though, I think we're a little bit more unhappy to do so. I think we're going to fold. Wouldn't shock me if we call though. Okay, we do fold, yeah. So call is like negative 0.28, so we are losing a fair bit by calling, so we're okay there. Okay, now we are the 3-better again, and once again we get a very similar board and we actually flop a straight this time. So we saw on a board almost exactly like this before, we saw that we were range betting, so we're just going to do that again. We're just going to bet small, and as you can see, kind of splitting between small and larger, and with this specific hand, we prefer to go small. So overall there, nothing we can really do differently with that one. This time, we get once again that same board, excuse me, except we have pocket 10s. Now, 10s with a club here is a really nice hand to potentially set up with a larger size. So I think that is an option here, certainly. I think that the option of the half pot feels pretty good here. And yeah, okay, so we are actually betting half pot quite a lot. This is a high frequency half pot board. We are putting a lot of pressure on various hands there. If we think about what villain's response looks like, when we bet with 10s, they're not folding too much better in the way of stuff that has the draw, but they are occasionally folding a weak ace here versus that half pot size. So that's a really interesting output to see there as far as what villain is actually doing with their weak ace hands. Definitely a good one. All right, this time we get the 10-9-6 once again, and we actually have the ace-king of clubs. So we have this 2 overs and a flush draw type hand. Now, I think people are very inclined when they have hands like this to just auto bet them, but we do have to be mindful that in this particular type of a spot, if we bet, we probably can get called by some worse ace highs, but probably not a lot of them. And we also probably can't get a pair to fold very easily. So it wouldn't shock me if this is a check here. I'm going to hit check. Yeah, it's high frequency check. So that's kind of what's happening here. When we bet with ace king, we can't really get that much ace queen and below to call. We also can't really get a pair to fold. So we actually don't have much reason to bet here, even though we have that flush draw. So turn is a 9, George checks. 9 doesn't change the board a ton, does give him some trips, does give us some trips, but low frequency. I would think we probably check again here. Yeah, high frequency check. And then river is a king, and George bets 15. You can't really see it there, it's kind of obscured, but George bets 15 into 20. Now, this is a fairly large size, but question becomes, do we beat any value? And I think the answer is definitely yes. We certainly beat king queen, king jack. Some hands like that can bet this size for value. And I do think we're probably, at worst here, we're probably pretty close to the threshold of where we would want to shove for value. So I think I'm going to shove. Let's see what we're doing. Okay, we're kind of mixing shoves. Yeah, we're right at the threshold there. If we have king 9, obviously that's a full house. King 10 we're shoving. Pocket kings. Yeah, we do shove some ace king. It's kind of just a mix in that spot. Trying to look at what else we have there that shoves. We have some bluffs, obviously, with some of the, maybe some of the ace highs that miss there. But yeah, we're not too conservative as far as shoving with a hand like ace king here, because we do beat a lot of hands there. So that's an interesting one. All right, well, we've come through the 45-minute mark. I think that's a good spot for us to call it a day for today. We did have that great hand where we had a royal flush, so that was a really interesting one. Thank you, everybody, for being here with me. I will see you all in the Discord. I'm going to be organizing our challenges going forward, continuing with next week, where we're going to have a catch-up week for you guys to check out any of the challenges that you missed over the past few weeks. And if you have any specific topics that you'd like us to cover in these weekly coaching sessions, then do let me know on Discord. I'd be happy to tweak the content a little bit, make sure that it is as appropriate as possible for you guys. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Appreciate it, Hostito. Glad you enjoyed the session. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and I will see you all next time. Good luck in the meantime, everybody. Have a good weekend. Bye.